Finding yourself lost in finding ways to be found, getting into your mind, lost in. Hey everybody, and welcome to Lost in the Groove. Today we have an interview with Gerard, and Gerard is here to tell us a little bit about what he's been doing for the past 10 years, what he's been creating, and take us on the wild ride, shall we? So,
Yeah.
how are
I
you?
hope I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I was gonna say 10 years. It's a lot of ground to cover. Hope you got all day because there's so much to the story. But of course, excited to be here and thanks for having me.
Of course, man. It's my pleasure. So, we gotta start with the elephant in the room, and that elephant in the room is I have to find this underground music collective. So my
Yes.
first question to you, and not even a question, what is it? What exactly are you doing?
So we are a digital music resource and multimedia services company. We're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We started
Noise.
so depending on what you consider the starting point, I consider the starting point the podcast, our official podcast, the Quinn Spin, which I actually launched in my childhood bedroom 10 years ago this August in 2013. Needed an outlet from corporate America. I did college radio, and podcasting was the answer. I was listening to my college radio show one night, and instead of having that be something that, was a wind down activity, it actually wound me up, and it made me want to pursue purpose, for probably the first time in my post college existence to that point. And
Right.
so we featured a lot of independent music, in that initial run of the podcast. We had guests on from 5 different continents. I mean, we were putting on events, it was me and a lot of my community theater friends from New Jersey, and we had this whole cast of characters. We had probably all told between the main show and the Quinn Spin Music Hour, which is now defunct, we probably did about 150 episodes in that initial run. And
Jesus.
then, yeah. So we were on it. And it was 2 years, that initial run. Like, I was doing 2 episodes a week for a while. I would do the music hours, and then we'd get everyone together and do the main show, which would come out every Monday. So we did that 2013, 2014, about midway through 2015. We took a hiatus. People kind of started going in different life directions. I actually went west. That was the direction I went, to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I went to college. I'd gotten a couple jobs out there, and it was just easier to live there as opposed to commuting the hour, one way every day. So did that. Show goes on hiatus. Everyone kind of goes their separate ways, and from there, I'm like, there needs to be more around this show. So I started a blog. The region of Pennsylvania I was in is called the Lehigh Valley. It's about an hour north of Philly. There's a music scene, pretty vibrant arts community there.
And
So I started,
not all of PA is empty. Be very
yeah,
surprised.
yeah. I mean, a lot of it's farmland, a lot of it's
Yeah.
very much country. It looks like most of the rest of America, but you have Philly, you have Pittsburgh, and then you have the Lehigh Valley, which is Bethlehem, Allentown, Easton. And so there's a vibrant arts and culture. There's a really strong music scene that I think has gotten even stronger in recent years. And so I started a blog called Lehigh Valley Underground to highlight the releases, highlight local shows. And that launched at the beginning of 2016. So 2016, 2017, 2018, we're really, building community. We're gaining traction. We have a lot going on. We're partnering with local organizations. We're starting to put on our own events. About midway through 2018, I decided that it was time for me to go learn more about how this industry works. I was 31 at the time. And it was kind of one of those, like, all right, if I'm going to do this, like, there's more I need to know to build this platform to its potential. And so November 2018, we rebrand to Underground Music Collective, still, of course, featuring all the independent music you know and love, covering a wider scope, of course, not just regional, but, taking submissions more readily from everywhere in the country. And yeah, November 2018, it was November 26th. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving. It was classic moving to Nashville story. I got in my car with whatever would fit and whatever little money I had in the bank, and moved here, had a place to live, was living with some friends at the time. And been here almost 5 years, and since then we've expanded to offer more creative services. The podcast is still going strong. We're hitting our 10-year anniversary at the Quinn Spin this summer, August or September, depending what you consider the official birthday. And I've since become an artist coach, and there's just so much more within this ecosystem than there was at the beginning. And that's the Cliff's notes of the story. There's obviously a lot more
Yeah,
detail
of
and triumph
course.
and struggle and all the things. But yeah, that's where we're at today.
It's crazy because I kind of relate very well to you. I started this podcast about 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and I had to rebrand last year. You know, the host that I don't really talk about this very often.
Yeah.
The host that I had on before, just we went our separate ways, and I think one of the things that I've noticed the most, especially when you look at the music industry, especially the underground scene, there's a lot more wiggle room and a lot more play that's at hand. And you have a lot of these people that are wanting something different. You know,
Mhm.
they want to get out of their own bubble. I could tell you this personally, where if you try to fit yourself in a mold, my opinion, if you try to fit yourself in a mold, you end up spending more time shaping the edges and trying to make sure each line is parallel to the other. You're wasting time.
Mhm.
You should be putting
Yeah.
your focus more on what's inside of it, not what is around it.
I agree, and that actually resonates really well with me right now, because like there's always that focus on the foundation of it, right? And that's a continually evolving thing, right? You don't just set it and forget it forever. Like right now, like the second half of 2023, I'm going to be doing a lot of foundational work to build this stronger and get us ready for the next half decade to decade of what UMC is going to become, right? And it's so much different than what it was certainly when we started the podcast, certainly, you know, when we started Lehigh Valley Underground, even when UMC became UMC, like it's taken on just such a life of its own. And the thing that you realize over time is like art evolves, platforms evolve, you have to evolve with them, right?
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
never going to stay the same, and it shouldn't, especially not in this digital age, running a digital platform where everything's constantly changing, your technology is constantly changing, the ways to do things are constantly evolving. You have to evolve with those or you're going to get left behind. And but even artistically, foundationally, like mission wise, vision wise, it's going to change, it's going
See,
to evolve.
I was watching a clip about this earlier where somebody was they made a TikTok and they posted it on YouTube as well. They said that, oh, look at this artist. Oh, they stole this from, you know, this person in the 1950s or 1960s. Oh, they stole that from that person. And I'm just like, hang on a second. Why is it stealing when an artist gets inspired by another artist that they want to emulate that?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything, I mean, everything is derivative in its own way, right? And everything does take influence from something else. I think it's really just a matter of how do you make that influence your own? You know, how do you take what has informed your journey, what has inspired you, and parlay that into something that, you know, you put your own stamp on, that you
Right.
put your own design on. And I mean, it can be a fine line, between that and, creating something that I think is too derivative. But at the end of the day, like we're all inspired by the world around us, right? And we're all taking cues from our experiences, from the people who have paved the way, from the artists who have paved the way if you're a musician, from the other platforms out there, on our end, kind of combining art and business at this point. There are
Right.
best practices we need to follow, right? And there are just ways you build this that,
Right.
would behoove you to, strengthen the platform for the long term, to follow those methods. But it's just, how do you make it your own, and how do you put enough of your story behind it, and how do you put enough of your values behind that to where it is yours and to where it is something unique that stands out among the rest of the marketplace, among the rest of the art being created out there. I think that's the sweet spot. If you can find that sweet spot, then you're going to be in this for the long haul, and you're going to build something that has a chance to really have a unique impact.
Well, I think also the biggest struggle is people have this attitude where there's so much. There's
Hmm.
so many underground artists. How could I ever be successful? And this is true. It is true. There's a lot of people, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't know if that is an attitude somebody should approach. Yeah, there is a lot of artists, but there's only one version of you.
Right. Right.
Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, like, as I mentioned, I'm an artist coach. We launched our coaching program officially, this March. And we start with defining your values, mission, and vision in that order, because that is going to set the tone for everything you build, right? What is at your core that you need to express, that's going to inform your journey, that's going to inform the things that you create, that's going to inform the type of people that you create it for and that you build community with? That's the most important thing. There is only one you. There's only one person with your story, with your perspective, with your experiences. And so lean into that. And it's a scary thing for a lot of people, right? To like lean into who they are, lean into their truth, because there are parts of all of us that are uncomfortable, right? There are so many of us that, we've had, traumas and other experiences that maybe we'd rather not lean into, but there's power in those and there's relatability in those. And I think finding a way to relate those experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, right, to others like you who have experienced similar things, but maybe are able to come at it from a different perspective, their own unique perspective.
Right.
That's what's going to drive us forward, and
Mhm.
that's the power of art. That's the power of music. That's the power of community and building a community platform, is you have these different perspectives that come together to form solutions on how to deal with very complex human issues.
Right.
Right. And so that's something, in working with artists, especially, directly working with them in our coaching program right now, really trying to get them to lean into that and lean into it fearlessly and not be afraid of the judgment, not be so afraid of telling their story, because there's power in that story. And at the end of the day, that story has its own audience. It's not everybody. It's never going to be everybody,
No.
and I think, we get caught up so much, especially in this industry, especially for a lot of young artists starting out, of trying to fit it into this box of what's trendy or what's popular or what's going to pop off right now based on what things currently sound like, based on radio trends, based on
Right.
social media. And at the end of the day, that's just a flash in the pan. What really matters is how you connect to your audience over time, because that is what's going to help you endure in their minds and hearts.
I feel though a great example I like to use is David Bowie.
Yeah. Hmm.
David Bowie was a person that he played multiple characters.
Yeah.
He had different stages of art that he experienced and was inspired by, and he didn't give a fuck about your opinion.
Right.
He just
Right.
made what he wanted. He did what he wanted, and people loved it. I have pretty much all of David Bowie's albums on vinyl records, and each one that you play is a different story by David Bowie. Like you
Hmm.
said before, the thing about being an artist is this: you have to be able to represent a story. And it doesn't have to be a real story. It doesn't have to be a true story. It doesn't have to have any visual meaning to yourself. But you need to have a foundation if you want to be a successful artist. Because how else are your audiences supposed to communicate or even connect with you?
Right. Right. Yeah. Bowie's a great example. And he's somebody who, right up literally until the end of his life, was doing exactly what you said,
Black
creating
Star, best album he ever made in his life by far.
Black
It's
Star. It is fantastic. It is
fantastic.
absolutely the musical complexity of it, and also just like he left it all on the table. He knew that was it. He left it all on the table. It was his magnum opus, and like for all the art, for all the meaningful art he created, like he went out at the top of his game, and yeah, there's always that story that we can communicate, whether it's informed by our own experiences, whether it's informed by those of other people, but you're communicating these shared human truths, right? And you're communicating our own, like, I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this, but like what you're communicating is something that transcends you, right? It's something that transcends any one person and exists to create a greater understanding of our place in this whole ecosystem and this entire universe.
Right.
And I mean, Bowie was a master at that, and just in the different characters he created, the different eras that his artistry went through, you know, I mean, just a prime example of somebody who just had a lot to say and found these creative ways to say it that were left open to the interpretation of whoever was consuming it.
Yeah. And when you're faced in front of artists, when you're in front of people that are instrumentalists and songwriters and creators, when you take, I like to use this as examples because it's very important. When you take someone like Prince, I was thinking about this the other day, take Prince and Michael. What is the number one difference between Prince and Michael you see across the charts? Prince was way more open than Michael was.
Mm-hmm.
Way more open. I mean, he was a Jehovah's Witness. He talked about abuse, very clear about how he felt about doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had Michael on the other end of it, completely the opposite. No one really knows anything about Michael. Come on.
Right.
Let's be honest. No one knows anything about Michael. Really.
Yeah. Which created a lot of speculation.
Correct.
And created a lot of rumors and a lot of innuendo around him that nobody, can quite nail down as true or false, right, to this day. There are plenty of stories floating out there, plenty of people who have given various testimonials, in various platforms, right, about Michael. The fact that he was so secretive and was so private created a lot of mystery around who was Michael Jackson, the person, who was Michael Jackson, the man, and in a way created a lot of intrigue around him, because on one hand you have this talented megastar of a pop sensation, right, who can sing anything, who can move like nobody's ever moved before,
ever,
who is
invented choreography that hadn't been practiced at all. Literally brand new choreography that has never existed before. Crazy.
Yeah, like one of the most innovative minds, in the history of entertainment, right? But yet that's as far as any of us really knew him. That's as far as any of us really had a chance to connect with him on a level, that, the personal Michael Jackson, the personal life of this individual, still to this day is shrouded in mystery and contains answers that nobody will ever truly have.
See, that's the thing though, when you yourself are faced with artists, I'm not saying that you need to be like Prince. I'm not saying you're supposed to be like Michael. It's okay to not fully engage with your audience if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lesson to learn from these two sides where there's an additive benefit. Again, you don't have to reveal your whole life to your audience, but again, there needs to be a sense of respect and honesty that is developed over time naturally.
Right.
But if you don't have that from the get-go, you create mystery and superstition.
Mm-hmm. And I think the downside of that is if you're not owning your narrative, to a degree enough to where there's not that room for mystery or interpretation to that great a degree, people are going to take control of your narrative for you. And I think that's a lot of what happened with Michael Jackson. That's what happened with a lot of folks who, they're public figures, but are so intensely private that the speculation then becomes people's reality, right? Because that's all we have to go off of, right? So there is, I think, that happy balance to strike where not everybody has to know all your business, and that's something that, as somebody developing this platform, as somebody, who in that respect is a public figure, like I've had to balance that out myself a bit, but like there's enough story there to own, and I think all of us has that. And it's about finding that and communicating that in ways that are, first of all, true to you and honest and serve to respect and honor your story and those who are a part of it, right? But also, it leaves enough room to where you're still honoring your own sense of privacy, your own sense of self.
Right.
Like there's just this balance to strike. And I feel like it's easy to go completely the other way from Michael, in this day and age where like everything's so open on social media and like you can communicate whatever you want. And like, a lot of us, in this industry in particular, do have a habit, I think, of oversharing things, as far as
But
every little thing that
but there
happens.
are, I will say though that I can't name any, but there are quite a number of artists, especially quite big ones in the underground scene, especially
Hmm.
that I follow,
Yeah.
and they're not they're honest.
Hmm.
But again, you can feel that sense of boundary where you're in their realm, like you're in their world. It is a very crucial and key marker to keep in your head, especially when you're in this industry, is that if you don't have that mentality, you're going to have a hard time
Hmm.
like representing who you want to be. Because again, like what we're doing right now is you're representing yourself right now. I am too. So this is what people are hearing. You know what I mean? God, it's like a Rubik's cube.
Right. Right. It's like how far is too far? You know what I mean?
Right.
And, I mean, I consider myself to be an open book, right? Like there's not much I won't talk about, from my own life, from my own experiences, growing up all the way till now, right? But there is that level of, again, just kind of honoring your story, and honoring your own boundaries. And it's it's a difficult balance to strike with all this technology because you want to be honest and you want to be open with people, but there's a certain, I think, threshold of vulnerability that you can cross to where, it's gonna start to tip the other way to where it's too much for a lot of people. And so the question that we then have to ask ourselves is, how okay are we with being too much? How okay are we with, sharing as much as we want to share and people's reactions to that? How much do we care what other people think who maybe aren't necessarily our audience, right? There's a certain bravery to putting yourself out there, and
Right.
putting your whole self out there. But the more you put out there, warts and all, the more the chance increases that, you're going to face criticism and you're going to, face some kind of blowback from people that it doesn't jive with. Are you okay with that? Are you comfortable with that? And to what level? And I think for a lot of people, like they have these gifts that they want to share, right? But they're afraid of the response. They're afraid of the criticism, the reaction, and it either causes them to not share their gifts to the fullest extent or share those gifts, but completely hole up otherwise, which either way, I don't think is a healthy decision. Because if you don't share your gifts, you don't share what's inside of you, you become bitter, you become resentful, you feel like you're leaving something on the table.
Well,
There's a lot of regret
I
with that.
feel that when you deal with instrumentalists, especially,
Mm-hmm.
I can say this for myself because I am an instrumentalist. I play guitar. Some of us just don't feel comfortable doing it publicly. I don't feel comfortable playing guitar public. I have sometimes played it on the podcast and had a few clips, but not that much. I don't feel comfortable at all.
Mm.
And when you're approached by this type of person, an instrumentalist is also a singer, and they have this barrier that they need to overcome. It's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you even approach that?
With practice, with time. I mean, we all have those things, we all have things from childhood, even, to where rejections we faced and ways we were criticized and things we were told we wouldn't ever be, right? And so it takes a lot of unwiring, I think, for a lot of us to get past those things. And it takes a lot of uncomfortable moments and uncomfortable decisions to step out in the face of that anyway, right? And so not everyone's equipped to do that where they are currently in their lives, where they are currently in their journeys. And depending on the severity of the trauma, it might take people a long time if they ever get there, right? But it takes putting yourself out there and doing it. It takes that practice, and you're going to be uncomfortable. And there will be times where maybe you miss the mark with the messaging. There will be times, again, where bless you, where there's this criticism, that takes place.
Sorry.
But I mean, really, the only way out is through, as cliche as that saying is. And the way to get past that fear, that resistance, is to act in its face.
Yeah. I did. Yeah. I could say that like I did that with podcasting
Mm-hmm.
because if you approached me 4 years ago, maybe, yeah, 4 years ago or 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and said that I would be talking in front of a microphone to people and interviewing, I'd be like, "You're fucking nuts. What are you talking about?"
Right. Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. 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 That resonates because I've had to go overcome those barriers over the course of the past 10 years, with this venture, with others, where it's just like, am I really ready to put this out there? What's the reception to it going to be? One thing, aside from this whole UMC ecosystem that I've recently started diving into is the world of fitness influencing. And a couple of years ago, never. I was afraid of the criticism. I was, really afraid to put myself out there in that way. I mean, I was an athlete growing up, but, I wasn't ever the star. I wasn't ever the starter. I could just, hear like, who does he think he is? You know what I mean? Like already starting up. And then I just decided to go in that direction and use fitness, use wellness as a part of my platform because it's been a huge part of my personal journey. But I could have never imagined myself posting a shirtless workout photo. I could have never imagined myself doing any of that,
Right.
until one day I just did it. And I remember the first workout post I ever posted, I literally sat on that thing for like 2.5 hours. Like my thumb was over the big red button. You know what I mean?
I
And,
feel you.
and I got a lot of support from it. I'm sure there were some haters. They didn't say anything to me. And at that point I realized their opinions don't matter because
No.
they're not even going to say it to my face. So you just go in that direction and you focus on your story and telling it, as truly as you're comfortable, but also you focus on your audience and you focus on the people that you're inspiring,
Right.
and leaning into that a couple of years ago, making that first post where, I had so much anxiety about it led me now to this point where like, I've been in this competition with Muscle and Fitness. I reached the quarterfinals. I don't know how much further we're going, but like we've outlasted
Nuts.
99% of the competition, and like the grand prize at the end, if we hang on to win, is 20 grand and a 2-page feature. 2 years
Nice.
ago, would you have ever, I would have never thought that was something that like I'd ever even approach. And just by taking these steps out, by taking these steps, leaning into these things that are my passions, that are important to me, and not caring so much about what other people had to say or think or feel about them, like it's led me to a position where the platform's stronger, where I'm a stronger person, where I'm more equipped to deal with that criticism as it comes. I'm more equipped to deal with the rejection and failure as it comes and learn from it.
I just like to comment with something funny.
Yeah.
I've had some weird one. I When I get like one of those bad comments,
Mm-hmm.
see, like I try to train myself the mentality where I don't care. Go
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
Right.
But if you put a good bad comment, you get a funny, you get a funny. I had one where somebody posted yawn. I'm like, you might need to go to sleep for a bit. Maybe take a pill.
I love it. I love it when you're able to clap back at it. Like there was one.
Which is not in a negative. That's the point I'm trying to make. Is like,
Yeah.
don't respond back of like, "Are you? How dare you?" Just like be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Let it roll. Let it
yeah,
roll, and just like find the humor in it and, inject some humor into the situation. That's how you diffuse it. Like there was one. So on the Quinn Spin, the intro has been the same for 10 years and it's very loud and boisterous. It's a throwback to the college radio version of the show, which those episodes will never see the light of day, but that's besides the point. And somebody commented on one of our episodes, that was the most cringeworthy introduction I've ever seen. And I'm like, well, it's been that way for 10 years, so you better get used to it. Like I'm not going to change it based on one comment. The platform is the platform, and it's going to evolve in a way that is true and is honest to itself, that it's honest and serves the people who it serves. And if you're going to take the negative feedback to heart that you get from people who chances are aren't really your audience and aren't paying attention anyway, then you're going to have a rough time. The best thing you can do is just like find the opportunity to inject some humor, to laugh at yourself, to be like, yeah, okay, it's, yeah. And now, like, I've referenced that on a couple episodes and in a couple interviews now, where it's like, yeah, somebody told me I had the most cringeworthy intro ever that they've ever heard, and it's like, well, I'm just gonna own that because it probably is. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, there are probably people who have heard the intro and shut off the episode. Okay, great. Those are
I
people aren't my audience.
I get it's kind of funny because I did for American Groove, and we actually have a new intro that's going to be coming out in the following episodes. We did a jingle. I do a
Yeah,
cannabis culture segment, and it's just this cheesy little jingle. I found like this '80s thing, and I kind of like put it together, and I did because I wanted to do it.
right.
Okay. I didn't care about like what the audience. I'm like, nah, that's what I'm gonna do for this show, and this is how it's gonna be represented. And that's
Yeah.
the way you gotta do. That's the way you gotta go. 100%.
Yeah, like, there's a part of your art that no matter how far it reaches, like, has to remain yours, right? Or you're going to get lost in the shuffle of your own platform. And so if there are these little things that you can just kind of like sneak in, or these little parts of it that it's like, no matter what, I'm not compromising on this thing. Like, it's a beautiful thing. I remember, there's a documentary called When We Were Beautiful, and
Okay.
it's about Bon Jovi. It's
Ooh.
between the Lost High. It's right during. It was taken during the Lost Highway tour in 2007, 2008, right
Okay.
before they went in to record The Circle. And there's a scene that they're playing a free concert in Central Park. Like, that's what the documentary is building up to, is this free concert in Central Park. And John's sitting back in the trailer in the green room, and he's putting the set list together. He's like, "What's our audience tonight?" And somebody's like, "Well, it's mostly casuals." He's like, so I can't sneak in my usual tricks. And what he's referring to is the fact that, like, yeah, of course, everyone wants to hear "Living on a Prayer." You give love a bad name, but how about I sneak in this totally obscure song from an album that came out 15 years ago, And he's expressing and pointing out, but also kind of lamenting, like, those are my favorite moments in the set, and they're the ones that just get the polite applause while people wait for what they actually want to hear, But, like, still, even so, even though it's not going to be necessarily the moment that hits the audience as much, it's the moment that's going to mean the most to him and give him that artistic fulfillment. So when you get to those anthems that everyone knows, which I'm sure are fulfilling in their own right, like, everybody's gotten what they came there for, including the artist on stage. And that's something, like, when you're that commercially successful, you've got to find those things that still make it about the art, that still, like, keep that at its core, like these moments that you can sneak in your art, sneak in your set list, on your album, that, like, mean something to you, even if some people might not understand it, and that just reminded me of that moment in that documentary.
See, like when you have artists that respond back to their fans
Hmm.
because they say something about the way that they look or who they are,
Hmm.
and they get angry,
Yeah.
and there's that backlash of how dare you disrespect me, and I just it's hard to wrap around your head and say you're an artist, you're representing yourself to your audience. Who gives a fuck?
Hmm.
Because you still have an audience that loves you. If that
Right.
person doesn't like your music, well, guess what? There are thousands of other genres of music they can listen to. And you have plenty of audience members that you don't need that individual.
Right. Right. There are how many people on Earth now?
8
7,
billion.
8 billion. Yeah. So, like, you can find a million fans out of those 8 billion, I'm sure. And I think, like, as artists too, we're so conditioned, to have this scarcity mindset of, like, limited resources and limited audience and that kind of thing, to where we feel like we have to make people like it. We have to make music that people are going to like. That's the only way to succeed, is if, like, everyone picks up what we're putting down. The fact is, if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. You're going to have your people who absolutely love you and rally around you and pick up on everything you do. And then you're going to have your people who hate it. Some of the most popular artists on earth, some of the most popular public figures on earth, are also the most polarizing. I mean, you think of somebody like Taylor Swift, which, love her or hate her, massively successful, right? And has this connection with her audience that
Real.
few artists have ever even touched, right? In the
Unreal.
history. Yeah. But then you have plenty of people who hate her guts, and who hate everything that she stands for.
Right.
And, but at the end of the day, like, who is she catering to? She's not catering to those people. I mean, she might reference those situations in a lot of her music, but at the end of the day, she keeps that connection with her audience top of mind, and another example of, in popular music is Nickelback, one of the most polarizing bands of the 21st century to this point. And like, you
Most
have people,
controversial band too.
yeah, like you have people who rally behind that band. I mean, they still have no problem selling out their shows, but then they became this meme on the internet somewhere over the past decade and a half where it just became cool to hate Nickelback. And at this point, nobody even really knows why. Like, it was
Well,
just,
I'll tell you, I'm from New York, and I can give you kind of a clear idea as to why. I think
okay.
it's because of country music.
Hmm.
Because when I was growing up in high school, people that listened to country music, because here's the thing, we didn't have Spotify and none of this stuff. So we used to make mixtapes, and we used to buy mixtapes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A lot of country music tapes and stuff, and when you were listening to music, had Nickelback in it. You were listening to a country song, like we're talking about like modern
Yeah.
country. Like I'm not talking about like real Southern. I'm talking about like modern country.
Yeah.
It was kind of a weird trend for a bit. And then all of a sudden, I remember this, like 2 or 3 years after that trend, it was like for like 4 or 5 years, bam, everybody started hating Nickelback. I'm serious, like 2 or 3 years right afterwards, it just started becoming a trend. I
So,
think it,
so I'm
I think it
trying
was
to
just
understand.
confusion of the genres, to be honest with you.
I'm trying to understand. So people would make country mixtapes and just like arbitrarily put Nickelback in the middle of them. I'm trying to, so like, what would, or are you saying like more, there was more like this sensibility within that music?
I just think that people that liked different types of modern country songs at the time, when you were hanging out with friends and you were just hanging out and they had the music that was playing in the background. They liked Nickelbacks. They threw it on there. So it was just something that people liked that were already liking that genre. So these were people that liked
Oh,
country music, and then they found Nickelback and they loved it, and then they added it
oh,
into their mixture of music for themselves. Yeah,
I see. So like these people who already liked this already polarizing genre
right.
lumped this music that was also kind of had like this southern rock element to it
But it's modern
into that.
country. Yeah,
Yeah, and it all got lumped together, and Nickelback became just as polarizing as the modern country.
yeah.
Okay,
Hence the
okay.
controversy.
Interesting. I've
Yeah.
never I've never heard that theory before. I just always thought Nickelback just became a meme somehow,
Do you
like the
know? Like you
Dallas
said,
Cowboys.
you were from Jersey. Do you not remember this?
I mean, I remember. No, this was never a Jersey thing. I at least
This
not
never
not
happened in Jersey.
no.
You never walked into you never walked into a sports bar and they're just playing that casual tune and you hear Nickelback playing.
I mean, maybe I just never noticed it. Like maybe I just never made that correlation. And
Hmm.
and I think like too in Jersey, like I don't
Different.
know. I graduated in 2005, and
Which county, mind me asking?
Morris, up in North Jersey.
North Jersey. Okay, so Morris. I know where Bergen County is.
Yeah, so we're west of there, like right in the middle.
Oh,
North Central is Morris County.
well,
That
because I grew up in Rockland County, New
okay,
York,
yeah,
so I was right next to Mawa,
yeah,
Ramsey. Yeah.
yep. My co-host, my Quinn Spin co-host Scotty Rock, lives in Nanuet, so I know Rockland well. Yeah, I was just up there a
West
few weeks ago.
or Nanuet? There's West Nanuet, and then there's Nanuet.
Just Nanuet, I
It's
think.
Nanuet. Okay, that's right
Yeah,
next to. That's by the harbor.
yep, right there. Yeah. But yeah, in Jersey though, like at least the circles I ran in, it was more pop punk and emo, which honestly I never really got that into. I was more into new metal, like Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park, and like Disturbed and Korn in high school. But like, so it was never really like maybe I just never really ran with a country crowd or hung out in enough places, encountered enough situations where that Nickelback, bleed in happened. But it does make sense.
Music was very. See, people have to understand this. Before 2010, music was kind of interesting
Hmm.
because a lot of people were in. I like to call those the genre bubbles.
Yeah.
You had the emo kids. Then you
Hmm.
got like the Barbie girls. They listened to Britney. They
Hmm.
love Britney. Like that was a thing. You remember that? Like there were
Yeah.
the Britney
Mhm.
girls.
Oh yeah.
So everybody was in these little genre bubbles, and then all of a sudden you start having people have now iPhones. You could download music, and
Yeah.
people now listening to music onto the go, and then you could find all these other genres and now listen to it as well. So you start having this mesh of people liking more things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting how after the iPhone, like
Change
our
everything.
our tastes really started to meld a lot more, and you're even seeing that in the way that music is produced and crafted now. There's a lot of genre bleed, there's a lot of genre blending where like more than ever, more artists are challenging themselves to push that envelope, and make music that doesn't necessarily fit in any one box. I mean, you started to see the beginnings of that, honestly, with the whole rap rock and new metal phase, I feel, because you were blending two genres that had stayed so far away from each other for a long time. Metal, hard rock, and hip hop, right? But then, you had these artists, coming out and creating this hybrid music. And, I
Right.
think of course, you had Limp Bizkit, you had Korn, but I think the innovators in that sense were really Linkin Park, in terms of who did it the best,
Well,
you know?
I'll tell you this though. If you want to talk about revolutionary,
Hmm.
think about like electronic metal.
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
for the longest time, I love electronic metal. It's one of my
Right.
favorite versions of metal to listen to, besides industrial. I like industrial too.
Right.
But
Hmm.
it was just a different approach to already a very harsh environment. Because number one, if you know anything about metal, you're louder, you're faster, and there's actually a choreography. You can't just sit there just banging drums and think you're doing metal. There's a choreography between the drummer, the bass players, guitar players, and the other instruments that's in there. So everybody
Yeah.
is kind of like in this. And then you have these people who are coming along like, okay, we're going to bring computers into this. And they're like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? But look at Rammstein. Like, hello, they've been around for like almost 20 years. Linkin Park, you talked about, that's a completely different genre, but like they were also completely revolutionary how they changed just the scope of things, the way that
Yeah.
other artists were performing
Yeah.
and
And I
making
think
music.
and I think too, alongside that, like you really get this sense of, what music can be when you're blending these genres and you're doing it well. And it gives the artist who's doing it the license to go in whatever direction they choose. And that can be kind of a slippery slope as far as, keeping your fan base engaged too, because, if you go too far in one direction or another, people start complaining that it didn't sound like the stuff that came before it. There's a lyric on Linkin Park's uh, a Thousand Suns album and When They Come For Me, where Mike says, once they have a theory of how the thing works, referencing Hybrid Theory, their first album, everyone wants the next thing to be just like the first, and really challenging that convention of like, we're going to create the music we want and we can play in whatever sandbox we want based on what we've already created and based on the way that we've already blended these genres. The truth is, like, over the past 2.5 decades, popular music has gone in a direction that gives you the opportunity to play with these different colors on the palette and mix them together, and create something entirely new. And I think the evolution of the musical medium requires it. I don't think it's beneficial or advantageous for things to stay the same, decade over decade over decade. If you want a certain genre of music, you can go find it anywhere you want.
Right.
But what's going to push the envelope is the people who innovate and the people who are able to blend those genres, the people who are able to continue creating and breaking down those boundaries. You've even seen crossover between country and hip hop lately, and here in Nashville, certainly, there's been a lot more of that ever since Lil Nas X and Old Town Road with Billy Ray Cyrus, but it gives any artist involved in a project like that the license to then go in one direction or another if they so choose, but then they can always bring it back to this genre melting, to this, you know, boundless creativity and innovation.
Yeah. And you want to talk about going back into the decades. One of the
Hmm.
most groundbreaking songs, it's also a very overplayed song a lot of the times, is Under Pressure by Queen.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because you have Queen,
Hmm.
which is kind of like a hairspray band. Let's just be honest. Um, and you have David Bowie, and you have these two groups that kind of meld together and mesh,
Hmm.
and it it worked
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think Freddie and Bowie complemented each other very well
because their
in
vocals.
their vocals, but also their personas, I think, were different enough. Freddie was that bombastic, in your face, leave it all on the stage, where Bowie was kind of more the brooding, shape shifting artist. You know what I mean? And like, there was just something about that dynamic between the two of them to where they really played well off of each other. And the vocals, of course, in that song, I mean, each one of them brought something unique to that track. And I mean, you even see, and it's, I think, really inspired a lot of these like super collaborations that we've seen throughout the years, where you have two artists who stylistically are different, but there are common enough threads among them to where a collaboration makes sense. And you just have to find those common threads. You just have to find where things work together, right? And it's interesting to see. Yeah, I'm always interested to see that take place. And sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses, but it's always, without trying it and without trying, these, to take these left turns, if you will, like, you're just going to stay in the same lane, and that's not going to be interesting. It's not going to push the art of music forward, the art of any artistic medium, if you just keep creating what's already been done.
I think though, we, especially the way that music has been created, it kind of goes up and down like a valley.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, I feel like in the past 20 years, there's just been a plummet, especially within creativity and the kind of music that's been coming out. But now, since 2020 and kind of coming out of the pandemic,
Mm.
there's been this fluctuation of shift where people have more interest in genres that haven't been had any interest in 20 years,
Yeah. Hmm.
which is bananas. But it just opens the doors up to more possibilities and more opportunities for artists that want to be in those genres and create that music, like an
Hmm.
actual chance the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because one thing I've noticed, especially since the pandemic, is like this funk, soul, R&B, Motown-esque revival. Of course, the most popular example of that is Silk Sonic, right? That Bruno Mars Anderson .Paak collaboration, which those guys, I mean, they had already relayed the bones of that out over the prior decade, right? Like in the work they were creating individually. But those two powerhouses, both creatively and in terms of talent, coming together was a big moment, I think, for modern music, because it does take, it is a throwback in a sense of like the music that it pays homage to, but it's got this, modern sensibility, these modern production techniques. It's slick, it's fresh, it feels fresh, even though it's got that timeless vintage sound,
Well,
right?
the biggest problem with Bruno Mars, I feel, was he came up at the time that Michael was still alive.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think that killed him because by the time Michael passed away and his career was getting more successful,
mm-hmm,
would have been it's still, I mean, he's doing pretty well, but I'm just saying that he was so compared to Michael so many times
mm,
because of the style of music that he was doing, but people forgetting where Michael got that style of music from the first place.
right.
Same way Elvis got his sound from Motown and from the black artists that were in Tennessee.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that initial point that everything is derivative in a sense, right? Everything comes from something else, and it's all a matter of how you can put your own design on it. And I think too, like, as Bruno's gone on, like, there has been more risk taking and adventure in what he's created.
He has to if you think
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, because you listen to some of those earlier cuts, right? Those earlier hits, and they're pretty standard pop songs for that era, right?
Yeah.
You think about a song like "Grenade" or the "Lazy Song," like the talent's there, but they're pretty standard pop songs, right? Like, there's not like a defining like sensibility to
It's
like this is what people
choreographed.
like. Yeah, but then like once you got to 24K Magic and onward, and certainly with into Silk Sonic, like, you really got to see the full breadth of his creativity start to shine. I feel, because he found his voice, he found his place in the ecosystem. And Anderson .Paak, I mean, the other half of that Silk Sonic equation is a genius, like just a creative genius in the way that he's able to mesh styles, in his own work from, from song to song and even within songs, just take a left turn and have it make sense. Like there are very few people that can do what he can do from a creative standpoint as a musician. So you put those two together, you put somebody with the raw talent of Bruno Mars with somebody of not only the talent, but the creative vision of Anderson .Paak, and it's magic, and I'm glad to see it informing, even a lot of the submissions we receive at UMC. There's a lot of funk and soul and R&B influence really sneaking back into independent music, which I think bodes well because, again, there's this timelessness about it, but there's still so much that you can do within those genres to
Well, they're
make
very
them.
difficult. They're very difficult to master. I mean,
Yeah.
if you've spoken to any funk soul artist, they'll tell you straight up, being able to perform those type of vocals, because
Hmm.
just like we're doing here, it's getting into a groove, baby. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It's getting into motions and feeling the strumming of the guitar and the way the lyrics make you feel. That's what funk and soul is.
Right.
And
Yeah.
for it to be back and people making really great versions and awesome songs to like dance to. I was listening to some songs and like, wait, this came out 4 months ago, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
There's that vintage sensibility coming back, and there is like they are difficult genres to master because there's such a precision, not only in the vocals but the instrumental. That the instrumental performances that like has to be there in those genres. Like it's one thing if you're in a punk band and it's kind of expected to be sloppy, right? But like R&B, soul, where it's like you are like it depends on the precision and the groove and the musicality so much
Right.
that like you can't miss, right? And so yeah, it's fascinating to see that being done, to such a level, but also to see it being done well to such a large degree now. It's inspiring and encouraging, and it
Yeah.
just shows that like, for all the evolution within this industry and for all the evolution within what sounds are coming out of, certain segments of the industry, like there are certain things that just, no matter what in any generation, they're going to hold up,
Right.
and they're going to hold their water, and it's timeless, in that sense.
I did want to point this out though, especially when you're dealing with a genre like punk,
Hmm.
because I know that punk is very fast,
Hmm.
but I can tell you as a guitar player,
Yeah.
one thing is coordination. Because
Right.
when you're doing a set of four and you're going at 150 beats,
Hmm.
okay? That's very fast. You
Right.
really
Yeah.
have to know how to move your um not that many people can master that skill, especially in punk, and unfortunately I've seen this too many times live.
And I think that's what I'm referring to,
Oh my
right?
god.
Is like you see it, there's a lot of bad punk out there,
Oh yeah,
right?
there's a lot. A
You
lot.
know, but
Wanna
like
be
if you
Ramones.
yeah, but if you can do it well, then by all means shine on, but there's a lot that's just like not tight, because they're taking something on that isn't necessarily within their wheelhouse, or maybe they've had a few too many beers before the set. Like we've all seen that happen, right? But to
Yes.
do it well, to do anything well, to perform anything well, like you've got to be on your game, and it takes time to master that and get the precision down to a degree that it's gonna be the top of the top.
See, I like to bring them up as an example as well as like the Ramones,
Hmm.
because they were a punk band that were a professional business.
Hmm.
They did that. That was their job. Their job was Ramones. Well, I could tell you this straight up. If you know anything about their history, they hated each other,
Hmm.
couldn't stand each other, like fighting, constant bickering. But that's the thing, though. It's your approach and a practice. You're not saying that you're not being creative, you're not being artistic.
Hmm.
They made very creative music and very artistic together.
Yeah.
But again, understanding that there are things and tasks and requirements and a schedule that you need to put in for this to
Yeah.
be successful, for you to
Hmm.
make an album, for you to make a song, for you to be able to write your lyrics.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. And I think too, it's an important lesson for any independent musicians listening to this, because I feel like, and this is just from my experience of just seeing this play out over the past decade, I think a lot of people get into music because they think it's going to be the antidote to having to work. You know, it's more work than any day job, especially in the beginning when you don't have a team and you don't have the help, right? When you're doing everything yourself. And so, I mean, you take an example like that, like you look at the artists, like the Ramones, or you can go down the line, you can go any genre, pick your favorite, who's reached the top of the game, in whatever genre, in whatever era. They put in the work. They put in the work to get there and to stay at the top and to have that sustained success. They didn't stop putting it in. Music, like, it's easy to say, oh, I just want to play music and I just want to write songs and I just want to do this. But especially in this day and age, there are so many different components that have to go into that. They go into running the business of creativity. It is a business, it's a fun job. It's rewarding and inspiring and all of those things. But at the end of the day, like, if you want to do it for a living, then you've got to put in all the work and address all the nuances that go into making it your job,
Yeah.
that go into making it your living. And I think, for a lot of people starting out, I mean, I can speak from my own experience, because like when we started the podcast, it's like, oh, we're just going to do this for 6 months and SiriusXM will pick us up and we'll be happily ever after. That never happened, and it was never going to happen with that attitude and with that lack of understanding of like what this actually takes. And that can only be forged through time and experience and struggle and all the things that we go through as entrepreneurs, to get to a level where we're able to do this full time. We're able to do this for a living. We're able to create the life we want from this. If you want that life, you have to remember you are creating something from absolute scratch, from zero. And so like any one of us, no matter who you are, no matter how far you've gone in any creative field, in any business endeavor, it started with an idea that was no more than an idea. And it's what you do with that idea and the work that you put into it, the time, the effort, the practice you put into it, that's ultimately going to determine how far it goes.
Make it a reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It isn't also important that as artists, remembering that even though government and society is against you,
Mm-hmm.
and even though there's more obstacles that you have to overcome, like you said, it's an idea, it's a
Mm-hmm.
hobby, it's a passion, it's what you're going to do with it. No one's telling you to be a rock star.
Right.
No
Mm-hmm.
one's telling you to do that. It's your choice if you want to be a rock star.
Right. Right.
Let's be
And
honest.
there,
I don't know how far it will be that you'll be a rock star, but anyway, it's really hard.
right. But even so, there are tons of ways you can create a living out of this
Right.
and build your life out of this.
Right.
You don't even have to be the artist. You could be a songwriter,
DJ.
You could be a DJ, you could be a session musician, you could write for sync exclusively and never do the artist thing and make a good living. If you get the right sync opportunities, you're going to make a good living. You have to put in the work to find those and to make those connections and to get your music sync ready. But it's absolutely within reach. You can work on the industry side of things. You can work on the creative services side of things. Like there are so many ways to skin this cat, as it were, to create a life that you can be proud of and you can wake up doing what you love every day.
Right.
You don't have to be Taylor Swift. You don't have to be the Foo Fighters. You don't have to be the megastar. Very few people ever get to that level, but you can make a good living and you can still have an impact and you can still make those connections that are going to last a lifetime and that are going to outlive you.
When you have such an unrealistic stature, because when you create this idea in a person's head where you have to be like super big, you have to have a massive audience, yada, yada. I feel like that's so much added pressure onto somebody that they don't need,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it does cloud your judgment as far as, I think, creating what you want to create and what's in your heart to create, right? So many artists, especially younger artists, I think, get into this and come to town and it's like they have people in their ear telling them what it needs to be.
Right.
Like, don't bore us, get to the chorus. It needs to be this. You need to fit into radio. Like, your image has to be this. And at the end of the day, like, you can feel when you're going against your values, right? Intrinsically. And like, you can fake it for a while and you might even get some mild success out of the deal. But eventually that's going to catch up to you. and eventually it's going to come down on you one way or another, whether that's professionally, whether that's in your personal life, whether it manifests itself into some sinister ball that affects both. Right. And so the best thing that you can do, and I guess maybe this kind of brings it full circle back to the coaching thing, is really define who you are and how that shows up in your artistry and what you want to communicate and the people to whom you wish to communicate it. Because if you don't do that, right, and you don't have that defined, somebody's going to try to define it for you. Just like if you don't control your narrative, somebody's going to control it for you. It's the same concept in a way where you need to have this understanding and you need to stand and stay true to that. And you need to act in a way that's consistent with that. Otherwise, it's going to be compromised and other outside factors are going to get in the way of that, And I mean, that's a microcosm, I think, for life. If you don't live your own life that's true to you and step out to create what you want to create in this world, somebody's going to tell you what to do with your life, and you're probably going to listen to them, right? Oh, well, why don't you play it safe and work in this field, because I'm not bad.
No, not happening.
You
Absolutely not.
Right. Well, like, why don't you play it safe and just become a doctor or go to law school or this or that? Like, for some people, they want to do that, and that's a passion of theirs, and it lights them up. For others, they do it for the paycheck, or they do it because their parents told them to, and they end up feeling very unfulfilled and resentful. And that's where you start, talking about like, having a trickle in other areas of your life, in your relationships, through your vices, that kind of thing. And I think it's really just a matter of, if you go in the direction that's true to you in the first place, there's a lot less unwinding that you're going to have to do later on.
Right. It's true. And it also begs the question that when you have an artist that wants to make a career for themselves as a singer or an instrumentalist or a songwriter, whatever you're doing creatively in the music industry,
Mm-hmm.
how do you want them to feel when they're being approached by you? When they're approaching you, I mean, because I feel like this whole time we've been talking is such a great way for artists that are seeking to start themselves a career. And again, being realistic with that, having an own job, having your own stability at the same time, and
Mm-hmm.
still being able to have a balanced life, but taking the next step, like actually taking this passion, this creativity, and making a career for it for
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all comes with, keeping things in balance and taking that time. And look, there are always going to be things that we have to do for money to keep things going. Because you've got the other part of this is you have to invest in it, right? You're at one point or another, all the free stuff is going to stop having an effect on, your growth. It's going to stop helping you grow. You can only make so many Instagram posts before you actually have to start like investing in your career to promote and get the word out and build your platform in other ways, right? Whether that's through PR, whether that's through
Advertisements,
advertisements.
SEO.
Yeah, like there's going to be a level of investment that you have to put into your career, and
Right.
that's not even getting into like creative services and the production. And, even if you're self-produced, like the software and taking the time investment to learn how to produce well, like there's so much that's going to have to go into it. And it takes time and it takes learning, and you're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes, but also you're going to have breakthroughs. And
Right.
if you can get to a point where no one breakthrough and no one mistake or failure, quote unquote failure, gets in the way of your long-term vision, you don't get too high or too low from any one particular event. That's the sweet spot,
Right.
and again, keeping in mind that it's called the creative journey for a reason. It's because there's no one single point of arrival. There are milestones and there are things, where opportunities that we have where it's like, all right, I guess I'm making it in this moment, but there's never truly a made it. That's a fabrication,
Made up by
by,
Hollywood.
by the same people who invented overnight success, right? Because
Yeah.
overnight success doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Like, people a few years ago were saying, oh, Lizzo, such an overnight success. She was sleeping in her car for close to a decade, negative bank balance, eating nothing but fast food. Yeah, the Lizzo that you see up here popped up in the mainstream media overnight, but you didn't see everything that went into her journey.
Exactly.
Like, and that's the thing. For most people, they don't have the advantages to just like flick of a wrist. Okay, here I am. I've made it. You know,
Right.
for most people, it is this slog, and there are so many things that you have to outlast, not only professionally, but in life,
Right.
you know, that are going to dictate how far you go, you know. And I mean, I'm 36 now, you know, and I've been doing the show. I started late, you know, by conventional industry standards. I started the podcast at 26, right? And there have been plenty of life events, plenty of circumstances where, you know, conventional wisdom might have said, like, okay, you've had a good run, kid. Now go get a real job, you know? But you have to be willing to stick past those and stay true to your long term vision if it's ever going to come to be. And you have to be willing to make the adjustments and the investments.
To accommodate to it.
Exactly. You know, and I think that's where, you know, we're sold this starry eyed Hollywood dream,
Right.
you know, growing up, like, oh, you're going to be such a big star. And we're sold that dream. We're sold that idea by people who, frankly, you know, as well intentioned as they may be, have absolutely no idea what goes into this. And, you know, for better or worse, you know, like, it's nice to, you know, dream big, but like, you got to turn dreaming into doing at some point. And
Exactly.
most people, I feel, are conditioned to keep dreaming without the second, much more important part.
Right. And it's all about taking it around and being able to ask yourself, if you want to do this, then you do it.
Mm-hmm.
All coming down to the individual. I don't like the philosophy of believing that the way to success relies on the help of others. This is true. However, there still lies you relying on yourself.
Right. Yeah. Because if you don't want it, it's not going to matter who helps you. You know, if it's not in your soul and it's not lighting you up to the point where you get out of bed ready to go after it every single day, you know, and of course, you know, keeping in mind life balance and, you know, that kind of thing, like, then it's not going to make a difference who's giving you the resources, who's giving you their time, who's helping you, who's filling what role. It has to be in your core. It has to be in your DNA. It has to be something that you intrinsically want to create. There has to be a life that you want to create for yourself, but also the impact that you want to have.
Right.
If that's not there and you haven't defined that for yourself, then when you run into the hardship, all of a sudden your dreams of making it big aren't going to be enough. You know, because you're not big right now. You don't have the mansion and the yacht and the cars and all that right now. What do you have is this dream that you haven't really even assessed whether it's right for you, right? Because you haven't defined your why. You haven't defined your values, your mission, your vision. That's why it's important to understand that why right from the jump. And I wish somebody would have told me that at the beginning, 10 years ago, somebody would have sat me down and actually worked through this stuff with me. And that's why I do that with people now, because it's like, it saves so much time just, shooting in the dark, trying to hit things that you may or may not even want, or may or may not even be right for you.
Right. And just to, I mean, again, if there's any artist that's listening here or anybody that is curious, where can they find your where can they find your work? Like your social profiles, and get on the latest. Find out the best tea.
Yeah. So if you go to undergroundmusiccollective.com, that's our central hub. You go there
Okay.
right now, you'll see two tiles. The left one takes you to the blog. That's everything that brought us to the dance, the reviews, the podcast, the playlist, everything. On the right, it's a creative agency. We have a bunch of UMC verified creators ready and willing to serve. We're talking photographers, videographers, graphic and web designers, an artist coach, even in the mix there, who are ready to provide you their professional services. And the great thing about the agency is any project completed through the agency then gets featured on the blog. So you get a little extra marketing boost too for your investment. And of course, by tapping in with us on one side or another, that taps you into all these resources, whether that's, the things I've mentioned, whether that's the educational opportunities. We've hosted a series of virtual panels. We're going to be looking to pick that back up. We have a Wednesday wisdom series where we have industry experts come on and share their Wednesday wisdom, with our audience on varying topics and things that
Love
they've
that.
experienced. We have events that we put on through our Nash Live series here in town. And then we're also branching that out. We're actually going back to Bethlehem in November for the first time in 5 years, hosting an event up there. Nashville style writers round featuring all local and regional talent to that region. And using that as, a litmus test as well as a homecoming, but a litmus test to see how that works in other markets. And, the hope is to bring that to other markets, outside of Nashville, outside of Bethlehem, your New Yorks and LAs, but also your smaller markets as well, your
Right.
non-traditional music markets. The idea is to build this ecosystem and create pipelines out to all the talented people everywhere to bring them into the resources they need to create a life and a career that they love.
They don't need to be in a major city. That's basically the point.
Exactly. And, we started this in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I started the podcast in Long Valley, New Jersey. Like, we want to talk about small town. That's as small as small towns get, in the
Yeah.
Northeast. And you can start something in one place and have it reach anywhere. You can start it in Long Valley and follow the trail all the way to Nashville or New York or LA if you want to, or you can keep creating from wherever you are and still connect to the resources and opportunities you need. So that's what we exist to do, is bridge that gap from, the independent artist to the greater industry and connect them and eventually create our own industry where, we have this entire robust ecosystem where we've got everything people need, all the resources, and, it doesn't really depend on, any one big break or any one deal. Like it's vibrant, it's alive, it's multifaceted. That's what we're doing. That's the long
You're in the
term.
right hands. You
Mhm.
you know that you're with people that understand where you're coming from and respect where you stand in as a person, because there is that stigma of, oh, you're a small town person, so you're never going to make it, haha, you need to move to LA.
Mhm.
But when you pull out that hand to help out that person and give them that opportunity, there's no more that barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And technology enables us to do that. And, you know, wherever you are in the country, wherever you are in the world, for the most part, you can connect to our platform. You can connect to those opportunities. And we're here for you and we're waiting for you. So by
Yeah.
all means, reach out. So on Instagram at UMC Nashville. Also, you can follow the Quinn Spin at Quinn Spin Official, 2 N's in Quinn, 2 N's in Spin. Nash Live, if you want to know what's going on in the local event scene here in Nashville, it's at Nash Live shows. We've got a few more coming up this year.
Music capital.
Including the Quinn Spin's 10th birthday show. That's our next one in September, actually.
Nice.
And then at Gerard Longo 12, if you just want to follow me, which, feel free to do that as well. You'll see UMC stuff, but you'll also see slices of my life if that interests you at all.
Mhm.
So,
You seem pretty neat, so I think it's worth a spin. If anybody's interested.
Thank you. I
Of
appreciate it.
course.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on. It's always great to hear an experience, a passion project work that's been put in, and also to be able to help out the artist community. There's so many of us that we need voices, hence why I'm doing this.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate, the work that you're doing. It's really important.
I appreciate that. And it's good to hear that, because we all need to hear that. No matter how far along we are, like, we need to hear that the impact that we're having, our desired impact. So I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate the platform.
Of course. Well, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to check out more of Lost the Groove, we are on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Lost the Groove Pod. So with that, we'll catch you on the next episode. Stay groovy, my friends.